Hello everyone, welcome to our mixed media moods for December. I'm super excited to be back. Here is our mood board. I apologize about missing last month. I was on a 22-day teaching tour in Australia. So I'll be doing this art journal page for December. It's called Malleable Words. And I'm going to include some image transfers, some asemic writing, and then I'm also really trying to incorporate the things that I love and have been sort of honing as far as my skills go, turning them into sort of design elements now and using them as the basis for my art. I am starting with a piece of 9-inch by 12-inch watercolor paper by Canson, and it already has this like really crazy background because I had some scuzzy water, like some really dirty water that I needed to switch out. But when it gets really dirty like that, I don't like to waste it. So I covered some watercolor paper with gesso and that sort of gross dirty water, and now I have these really cool backgrounds sitting to the side to work on. And I thought this one with its gray tones lent itself really well to this mood board. And then that red, that pop of red is just completely to die for. So this is a Naphthol Red Deep by Amsterdam Acrylics, Royal Talons. And so I used a really big wash brush to get these sort of uneven squares, and I did a tiny bit of splattering, and then I used my heat gun to dry most of the paint, really around the edge. So the thicker the paint, then the longer it takes to dry. And even here in the desert, if the paint is pretty thick, I have a little bit of work time. And then I also just use some water on top of it to sort of bring it back to life because acrylic paint is water-based. And then I use a baby wipe to sop up the excess paint that hadn't had a chance to dry yet with my heat gun. And so then I got these really cool sort of washy, interesting squares. And then I did some stitching around them with my sewing machine and just some basic black thread. And I used a regular walking stitch, like a straight stitch, and then a zigzag stitch. And I love the fibers and the hangy threads, so I'm leaving those all around. And I'm using masking tape now to add another design element, another layer of texture. And I love that masking tape is sort of plastic and it has this almost resistness to it. And so I used that to my advantage. I put down the layer of masking tape and I tear them so that they don't have like such straight edges. And I do some scribbling with a graphite pencil to reinforce that stitching, the square stitches. And then I use my Stabilo on top of my masking tape and some water. I activate it with a wet paintbrush because it is water soluble. And doing that makes this Stabilo turn into sort of like just like a dark watercolor, almost a grungy watercolor. And because my tape is that sort of resist effect, it pools on top and then really turns into these sort of like gross splotchy areas. I love it so much, and I use the word gross but only in the most endearing way because I love it so much. And then I decide that I would really love some text. I don't want the text to be legible, and there isn't really text in our mood board, but it's more about the contrast of the white and the black. And so you can see the paper that I chose is very new as far as like having book text goes because I collect vintage book text. But this one was gifted to me, and I actually really like it because it's got this stark white background and then all of these very technical black text terms, and I think it's like a textbook for secretaries or something like that. So it is very specific as far as this book goes, but I was really excited to image transfer with it. And one of the important things to remember is that image transfers are always going to come out opposite of what you think they will. So I have that down, and then I also turned it upside down. I put fluid matte medium down on the paper, and then I put fluid matte medium on the piece that I want to image transfer, and I put the two fluid matte medium sides together. And then I scraped them with a little scraper to make sure there was a perfect cohesion between the two. And then I let them dry, and I heat dried them, and I let them dry, and I heat dried them, and I really made sure they were perfectly dry. And then now I'm pulling up the excess paper, and I'm using a paintbrush and a water bottle to dampen the back of the paper. So it's important when you're working on this type of an image transfer that you don't get your glue or your adhesive of choice on the top of the paper, because then the next part of the process is to dampen the top layer and remove all of the pulp, so it's like the text you can see and the pulp, to reveal the text underneath, which in this case not only will be backwards but is also upside down. And so that's really great because it lends itself really, really, really well as a design element rather than a legible group of words. And you'll see what I mean as soon as the rest of this comes off. And just spend a little time working it, and sometimes you need to dampen it a little more, and then if you're not sure how well it's coming up, you can always heat it dry and see how it looks. And if it's still sort of milky and cloudy, then you can dampen it some more and work the pulp off some more. And it's simply that simple. You just keep working it till it's ready, and it depends on if you're looking for a perfect image transfer. Really it just takes a lot of practice and testing things out. But I like the distressed look of image transfers that don't work out well. And in fact, this one came out too well for me and for my intended purposes. So then I got out this clay tool and I scraped away portions of that image transfer that I had there. And so it gets kind of scratchy and scritchy, and it's really cool. And I liked how it was looking on the left-hand side, so I flipped it over to work on the right-hand side and see if I couldn't get the exact same thing happening there. And luckily I can, and I'm not sure if my paper is feeling a little extra tough because it has a layer of gesso and then a layer of like dirty water and then two layers of gel medium, but I did get lucky and I didn't tear through my paper. Keep that in mind when you're pulling like heavy scratchy tools and stuff. It's easy to tear your paper and your base. So then this is sort of right here at the end, and what I'm doing is I'm dipping my pencil, my Stabilo Marxol, into a container of water, and I'm doing some asemic writing. So asemic writing is where, and I've done this for a long time in my art journaling, but I just learned the correct term for it from Dina Wakely. And so it is where you have sort of this idea or this element in your artwork that looks like handwriting, that looks like a message, but it's illegible. You can't read it. And so it sort of provokes you and it interests your brain into being like, what does that say? And then, you can never read it. So because it's how we've trained ourselves to write and get this sort of feeling in our work. So that's it. The only thing I did real quick after that was do a tiny bit of splattering with that Stabilo Marxol. So this is my piece. These are the close-up shots again. Thank you so much for being here. I really love this mood board, and I have some other smaller pieces coming up over the next couple weeks based on it. And I'd be interested to see what you have coming up. Please feel free to share your beautiful projects based on our mood board, both in our Facebook group, and you can link up on the blog. This is Jen's project. It's gorgeous. You guys pop on over and get all the details on it. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you again. Thanks.